what are some of the things that you're most concerned about? Inflation, economy and jobs, debt and deficit. Like those cover the main, I would say, first place finishes, right? Those are all way above. And then you have this trough of, several other things in second place. Like that is the thing that is so concerning on people's minds, as we've kind of gone through the last few years, but they're always so consistently important. The Ways and Means Committee, we've only had one member of Congress from Utah on this committee in like the 60s for 2 years, and we've never had a Republican member on the committee. So that was a really neat thing to be the first Republican to be elected to this committee. The other thing that I think people can relate to, I never crossed over with the late Senator Orrin Hatch, but I was an admirer from afar, from close up, as I was going through my own professional experience before taking this office. And he served in the Senate on what's called the Finance Committee, and they're comparable committees. A lot of the legislation that we'll do in Ways and Means goes through Finance and vice versa. And he was such a champion for Utah priorities. He was an effective legislator back here. He strong conservative, but he found a way to be productive. And that's the type of work that we've got to do if we want to solve some of our challenges going forward. He had great relationships with folks from the other side of the aisle, like namely Ted Kennedy. And he just found a way to get things done. And we've got some major challenges. And so as I looked at it and I thought, okay, so what is our biggest issue going forward in a country? The fact that in 20 or so years, 50 cents on every tax dollar will be going towards paying down our interest. Sure. A debt to GDP ratio that's way out of whack. This is beyond World War II days, and major issues there. So this is a committee that can address a lot of that stuff, and I was thrilled to be able to get on it. Our biggest issue with regards to military spending in our defense budget is actually our ballooning and growing debt. And so I will always be very involved and supportive of all the work that's going on at Hill Air Force Base. But we've got a great delegation, and Chris Stewart, Representative Stewart, is on House Appropriations Defense Committee, and that covers a lot of the Hill Air Force Base and defense work. So your delegation, your Utah delegation, and the House of Representatives, we are a great team. We spread ourselves out to make sure we're covering everywhere. From Energy and Commerce is a top committee. Appropriations is a top committee, and now we have someone on Ways and Means, as well as Burgess Owens got appointed to a very important committee as well, transportation and infrastructure. So this type of work does matter. It's not the most interesting all the time. You don't see it play out on cable news, those topics, but this is the work of Congress and stuff that we want to be involved in real important matters. So thanks for noticing and seeing what's going on with us.
Well, it's an important appointment and position, especially as you mentioned with some of the debates coming down the pipe for Congress in just the next few weeks even. And a reminder for listeners, this is a live radio town hall district-wide with Congressman Blake Moore. If you have a comment or a question for the Congressman, 753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868. And Congressman Moore, we talked about this before outside of radio town halls and interviews with you, but you convened I'm thinking a year ago, maybe longer than that, you convened a task force on debt, and you'd put some well-known Utahns on this from the business community, finance community, general public, and you just got everybody together and you said, work on this and report some suggestions and ideas. Are you thinking about that now as you think about the future of Ways and Means as a member of that committee?
So not only thinking about it, but actually leveraging some of the recommendations that we have from it to go into this debt ceiling negotiation that we'll be dealing with over the next few months. There are things directly out of that recommendations document that we are going to try to push to be able to get as this debt ceiling, this looming debt ceiling action we need to take plays out. And that task force was put together not for anything other than to make concrete suggestions on how to improve this, to take what we do so well in Utah and see what I can implement back here. It's tough to replicate the responsible nature that Utah does things into a big behemoth of the federal government, but I'm chipping away at it and getting on the Ways and Means. This is where the debt ceiling conversations will go through. This is where Tax Cut and Jobs Act, to what extent will we be able to renew some of those measures that created real strong economic growth? How can we make sure to support things like foster care and do them in a proper way, and some of the welfare programs that exist, and make sure they're means tested, and we're all back here. There's a big crew of us. Many of my colleagues, Democrats across the aisle, they can look back to the late 90s and see, okay, President Clinton, Republican-led Congress, they found a way to work together. They actually created a balanced budget. They still were able to keep strong economic growth. There was a dot-com bubble, which hurt a little bit. That dipped into some of that revenue, but for the most part, they were able to find a way to move forward through some welfare reform that was productive, actually helps people get out of poverty. That's what those programs are designed to do, and that's the type of work that will be done through Ways and Means. And I just love that task force because I can go back to them, I can communicate the things that we're working on. They can do some research and make the suggestions. And it goes back to the three things that I said when I ran for Congress for the first time. One, the support Hill Air Force Base. It's a very important entity. Needs to be protected and strong focus. Two, reversing our debt culture, being a part of reversing our debt culture. And three, and being that optimistic voice for the next generation, a conservative, optimistic voice for the next generation of Americans, so we don't lose what made our country so successful and so great. And those are things I'm really working on. I got asked today, I'm like, well, with the way the debt is and the amount of interest we're paying and all of these potential calamities, are you hopeless? And I said, no, that's why I'm back here. My hopelessness was what made me want to get involved. And it's not easy, Jason, to put out so much. A lot of politicians avoid talking about debt and deficit because, they know how difficult it is to address, right?
Sure.
And I'm putting a lot into it because A, I know it's our nation's biggest issue, and B, like if I look out 10 years from now, and I come back and tell my constituents I have given it everything I've got, and here's what I did improve, here's what I couldn't. That's the way I want to communicate with people. I'm okay to aspire to big things, and I'll just keep communicating along the way. This is possible. This is not possible, but here's what we're doing instead. Like, that's what I want to work on.
This is a question from a listener coming in via the chat. And again, for others who'd like to join us, you can send the messages via the Google Chat, KVNU-FTP, or call us at 435-753-5868, 1-800-369-5868, a live radio town hall this hour with Congressman Blake Moore. And Congressman, a listener, I'll paraphrase here, a listener here with a bit of a rant, but one that I think both you and I might agree with from our previous conversations at least. The listener says, sometimes it's hard to believe either party is serious about this, from Bush Jr. to Obama to Trump and now Biden. It seems both parties are willing to spend beyond their means if it's a priority for that party. No one's serious about actually doing something about our spending. You've expressed similar sentiments before, right?
Absolutely. And if anybody suggests otherwise, they're truly not a credible voice, in my opinion, and they're just being a partisan soundbite. But here's I will just briefly, because I don't want to bore your listeners, I will briefly dig into the history of where our party and where Republicans actually have been successful.
Okay.
So in 2011 to 2018, when Republicans had control of the House, and some of those years they had control of the Senate as well, discretionary spending decreased. There are two types of spending in our federal budget. There is mandatory and there is discretionary. The key thing to know about mandatory is it goes on autopilot. These are government programs that get set up that kind of just, exist each year, and you don't even vote on them. But the discretionary budget must be voted on each year. So when Republicans are in control, they for 7 straight years, reduced that overall. So to say that Republicans don't care about spending and that they've always just increased it, it's not entirely true. They actually put a clamp on that. They didn't just increase it according to just letting it grow with inflation even. Sometimes that's the easy thing to do. It's like, oh, well, we're going to keep the budget the same but grow with inflation. They actually found areas of waste that they could cut, and we still saw economic growth even with the reduction of spending during that time. The problem is the mandatory spending is much more difficult. These are Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, big government programs. This is healthcare, and these are things that, if a Republican ever says they want to get to a point where they can help reform Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all of a sudden we get people saying that we want to cut these programs and we don't care about healthcare, we don't care about seniors and stuff like that, and it's really politically tough to sort of beat that message. I will not shy away from these conversations because I want to be viewed as somebody that's very, very serious about getting after our debt and deficit issues. But that is an area the mandatory spending continued to grow, and it has grown for 50 years. It used to be 30% of our budget. Now, mandatory spending is 70% of our budget.
Wow.
And so it just continues to grow and grow and grow, and there's really not much that legislative work that gets done on an annual basis to fix it. There are some big things that happen that it'll take place over the course of a half a century, but for the most part, they just continue on. And that's dangerous because right now we're in a different society than we were back in 1935, right? We can invest in mutual funds. We have ways to actually save for retirement in a more productive way than just relying on Social Security. And if we just let these programs go unchecked, we've got a problem. So that's the thing to remember. But when we had the majority in the House, White House, and Senate from 2016 to 2018, our focus was on competitive taxes, so making sure the globally competitive tax rates, that Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and what that does is actually grows the economy. But there is there's a time period where those tax cuts did also add to the deficit, and that's a fair criticism, and that's something that Republicans have to recognize. Like, okay, we have to. If we're going to cut taxes, we have to be able to, and willing to go after some of the spending measures. And there wasn't the appetite in those 2 years. It was more of a long-term approach. They're like, okay, after we get tax cuts done, let's then go and make sure we get after our mandatory budget. But it didn't come to fruition because we lost the election. We lost in 2018, we lost the House, and we lost the Senate, we lost the presidency. We've got to win elections as Republicans, and we've got to show the American people that we're serious about spending.
Sure. This is in addition to and related, I guess, to the Ways and Means Committee position you'll hold. You also, heading into the 118th, will continue serving on the House Budget Committee. And Congressman, I thought this was interesting, and maybe you can explain to listeners, where these comments came from. But the chairman of the committee, Representative Arrington from Texas, a Republican from Texas's 19th district, said in an interview he was looking forward to continuing to serve with you on the committee, and as chairman said he appreciated a unique perspective you bring in from your work in Congress and before with small businesses. Can you, for listeners, can you explain how that experience could help in a position like serving on the House Budget Committee?
Absolutely. So in my background, I've had before Congress, I had two major sort of experiences. One was more federal intelligence, foreign service type of work. I'm always a little coy about how I communicate it. It's much better in an in-person town hall. But I love that work. It was important. It was a chance to serve in a unique way for my country and all that, and I got to live overseas and everything. It was a great experience. The time I spent for 8 or so years prior to this role as a management consultant is actually some of the most important work. It adds to my zest for being productive back here and finding ways to collaborate with people, identify what the solution needs to look like, and then build a framework on how to approach getting to that. Like that's like a change management framework type of concept. We worked with companies from all shapes and sizes, nonprofit, for-profit, public entities, many Utah firms, many international and multinational corporations. Some of the key work that we did for smaller businesses is help them identify what the consumer research tells them about where they should be going and how they should be interacting with their customers. So a company that, is a healthcare company, they want to know how this message plays, how their message plays and their products play with doctors. And so we went out and just did a whole bunch of testing with doctors, getting real live doctors with real products and communicating it in multiple ways through marketing research, focus groups, things like that. And then we take the recommendations to go back to the company and say, hey, you should do X, Y, Z. We built a predictive model for a nursing school.
Wow.
It was like, hey, there's a lot of online nursing programs out there. We want to know if we should get in this space. So we built them a predictive model about what their potential yield could be and how much market share they could gain. And the results weren't rosy. That was the fun part, was like, oh, no, this isn't the best news for our client. I hate to give this presentation. But the reality was 6 months later, I went back and visited that client again, and they were like, we are so grateful you were honest with us. And you told us, like, what the reality was, because we decided to just use our online school to supplement our ground campuses. And we are now becoming so much more efficient, and we actually make more revenue off of our ground campus, and we've got happier students. So, like, data is so important to decision making, and that's the type of work that I did. And it's not easy in the federal government, to change the way things are running and operating. But I have our team running on that same type of consultant experience. They make fun of me because I have whiteboards in the office, and I make us diagram things out and work in a more collaborative manner. And I can't exist if it's just going to be politics as usual.
I love it, and a rare opportunity for our listeners here and myself to see behind the scenes on some of this, how these decisions and discussions play out, and what experience is relevant. Again, the chairman of the House Budget Committee going out of his way to say he was excited to be working again with Congressman Blake Moore from here in Utah's 1st Congressional District as they move ahead. Again, debt, spending, budgets, all of this going to be a huge focus over the next several weeks, months, even years in Congress and the United States Senate. Congressman Moore serving both on the House Budget Committee and now also the House Ways and Means Committee, probably one of the most powerful committees when it comes to the constitutional duties of Congress. If you have a question, again, this is a live radio town hall, 435-753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868 if you're listening within the district but outside of Cache Valley. We have a lot of questions that came in from listeners earlier this week, a lot more to discuss with Congressman Moore from the latest news from his office. So we'll keep things going, but please join us. A live radio town hall with Congressman Blake Moore continues right after this 2-minute break.
It's the Napa Case Lot Sale at your locally owned Napa Auto Parts. Find Napa Premium Oil, $3.59 a quart. Napa Premium Synthetic, $5.49 a quart. Valvoline 5W40 Premium Blue Synthetic, $23.99 a gallon. Chevron Delo 15W40, $15.99 a gallon. Lubrigard 15W40 Synthetic Blend, only $13.99 a gallon. The Napa Case Lot Sale at your 5 locally owned Preston to Providence Napa Auto Parts.
Napa! Yeah!
We start each new year filled with hope and prosperity for things to come. At Cache Valley Hearing and Audiology, it's no different. Dr. Daines is so grateful to get to call Cache Valley home and continue to offer his services to the wonderful people that live in our beautiful valley. He wants to help you start your new year off right by improving your hearing, which over the course of time will help improve your quality of life. Give them a call at 435-753-4327 or 753-HERE to schedule an appointment, or you can visit them online at CacheValleyHearing.com.
It's a cold, blustery night, but you're warm and cozy inside in front of your new low-pi or extraordinaire fireplace. The dancing flames, nice even heat. You and yours are loving it, and you know it's love when they say,
"Boy, we're really saving on our heat bills, aren't we, hun?"
For the love of savings, ask Chim Chimney about rebates up to $3,800 for qualifying conversions from inefficient wood stoves for fireplaces. We sell, service, and install. Visit us at chimchimney.com.
Own a small business or a farm? You thought about solar? Listen up. A new USDA grant was announced allocating $300 million for farmers and small business owners to put in solar. That's right. The government will help you get solar installed, covering 40% of the cost. And don't forget, as a business, you can save up to 50 or 60% more with federal and state tax credits. Second Sun Solar will install your system and help with the USDA paperwork. Call Second Sun Solar today at 435-363-9917 or online at utahsolardirect.com.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Congressman Blake Moore here with us for a live radio town hall. We do have some callers on the line. A lot of questions that came in via email over the last week. Please join us, 753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868 if you're outside of Cache Valley but within the district. Congressman Blake Moore with us for the hour here for this live radio town hall district-wide. And, Congressman, we do have our first caller on the line with a question for you. First up here in this radio town hall, Tim. Tim, your question for Congressman Blake Moore.
He was just talking about discretionary spending cuts prior to 2018 with Republicans controlling the House and Senate and whatnot. I wondered if you could name anything more specific or be a little bit more specific. And then maybe that's part A. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but then part B, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had just mentioned something, the national debt, 25% of the national debt being from Trump administration, and wondered if you had anything to say about that.
Great questions, Tim. Thank you. Congressman?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Excellent questions. Okay, so I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the discretionary budget was at about, I think, 1.3 trillion, maybe 1.2 trillion in 2010, 2011, and Republicans were able to reduce that by about 100 billion for the next few years. It then increased a little bit with inflation over those next few. By the time that Republicans lost the majority in 2018, it was about $100 billion less than it was when it started in 2018. Fluctuated over time, but overall from about 7 total years, it decreased overall. I think the numbers on it are in the range of $400 to $500 billion that they were able to trim from that budget. I do not have the diagnostics on exactly what that is. There are 12 appropriations bills, 12 big buckets of money that you have a chance to look through and find where is there any type of waste, if you will. The term waste, fraud, and abuse is often used. That applies. That has to, as members, we have to be able to look at all things and find areas that we can save. They were able to do the majority of that in non-defense related cuts too, and so that's an area that I'm hopeful that we can look at and find how can we trim that budget a little bit. But like I said, even with Republicans doing that, which is not easy work, but accomplishing that, the amount of spending year over year still grows because of the mandatory side of the ledger. And that's because, the baby boomer generation in the late 2007, 2008, we started to retire. We had a financial, we had a recession then, so we had less revenue with higher expenditures. And ever since then, it's continued on. That's not really blaming anybody, but other than blaming everybody. We didn't plan for that time period of baby boomer retirement adequately. And then when you add in a recession at that same time, and then you get that debt because of that, then all of a sudden you have a compounding problem. As each of us recognize, that's why we all stay out of credit card debt, right? And so it was solid work that Boehner and Paul Ryan did over those 8 or so years, find areas of discretionary spending that we could reduce. But we've got to get after some of the big things as we move forward. Now, the Republicans will be focused on the discretionary budget. Like I said, there are 12 different types of bills, anywhere from the various departments of commerce, education, even Congress. I talk to my team and say, where can we find 1% to 3% of our budget that doesn't affect people and doesn't affect mission? Right? We don't want to affect those things. We don't want to just fire people to fire people. We want to make sure that we're building a strong mission and find areas of waste. And that's how you have to go about doing this. So that's why I'm hopeful on that side. With respect to President Trump and the tax cuts, there was a significant amount that was added to the deficit, because anytime you cut taxes without cutting spending significantly, there's only one equation. It's the same equation as President Biden by adding spending but not increasing taxes. But both equations, you end up with more deficit. The difference and the reason I'm so supportive of reducing taxes with the purpose of growing the economy is that those revenues, we make up those revenues. A stronger economy grows revenue. It keeps companies from moving their assets overseas. If they can go and get a better tax break in Singapore, they'll go set up shop in Singapore. I lived in Singapore before, and an Australian mining company would actually set up their corporate office in Singapore because they get a lower tax incentive. And that's why some of those countries can be competitive. So the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and Trump's approach was to level the playing field so we didn't have so much seepage, if you will, on companies moving overseas and setting up shop elsewhere. And we saw the data. You can see the outcomes that companies stayed and existed here. I'll give you a Northern Utah example. Nucor, steel manufacturing, really great company, corporate structure. They care about their employees greatly. When they got to take advantage of the corporate, the lower taxes on corporations, they increased salaries across the board. Their middle-class wages increased significantly. They were able to give back to the community. They bought ambulances for Box Elder County, like all these different types of things. You see that going across in multiple areas. But yes, that did add to the deficit. With the expectation over a certain time frame, you could grow those revenues and either make up for it or get an opportunity to really tackle some of the reforms needed to get our spending under control. And that was the mindset. To really implement that longer term plan of tax cuts plus spending cuts, you needed to win elections. And Republicans lost the House in 2018. 2020, they did better in the House. We had a really good year that year, lost the presidency, and then lost the Senate a few months later, which was unfortunate because over the last 2 years, Democrats found themselves in the situation of, we weren't expecting to necessarily win the Senate because that was the runoff election in Georgia in 2021, and now we've got to implement some of the things we've been wanting to do for a while. And they found that, major spending proposals, the American Rescue Plan for one, and a $1.9 trillion bill, that creates inflation, right? You can directly tie that to a lot of the inflation, and that's detrimental to a lot of things in the economy. So there needs to be a more sustainable way to go after doing this. That's why I'm excited about this committee, is because we can find areas like this. I just met with a team that has been identifying a lot of areas of waste within the CMS service. Just the regulation and the guidelines, this should be a very, very bipartisan approach to finding ways to make quality control measures. They're outdated. They cost more money than we need, and that's just money that's wasted. It's not even going to benefiting people. It's just kind of wasted money stuck in bureaucracy. Those are the kind of things I think we can accomplish over the next few years, and we're going to be working on those a lot.
Are listening to a live radio town hall with Congressman Blake Moore. Again, Congressman Moore answering a question from one of our listeners. Tim, great questions there, asking for more specifics on what the plan would be to reduce spending, decrease the deficit, and grow the economy at the same time. Tim, thank you for the question. Headed into our news break here, but the radio town hall does continue up to the top of the hour. 435-753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868 to join us here with a question or a comment for the Congressman. Before we get to that news break, Congressman, we do have a question from a listener via the chat here as well that I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but listener wants to know how you feel about the temperatures in Cache Valley today, sitting at 2.4 degrees right now. At lower? Oh, Bill says lower than that.
Yeah, buddy.
Minus 2.4.
I'm going to get my kids ready for school at -7. I miss living in Phoenix. It's brutal. I remember those cold walks along the quad over to Old Main.
Oh, man.
class back when I was a freshman.
Oh yeah, those 8 a.m. classes. That is.
It's DC right now, and I left a very, very frigid wife at home who hates the cold more than anything. We went skiing one time this year, and she hadn't thawed out for like 2 or 3 days.
Oh, it's just bitter cold here today with, barely hitting 0 or 1 as a high, but it looks better tomorrow. So appreciate that question from a listener. Tim, again, appreciate your question. That was a great question for the Congressman. Others out there, if you have questions, 435-753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868. We'll continue with our radio town hall with Congressman Blake Moore live this hour right after this quick 4 or 5 minutes news break with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News Time is 4:36, and the news is brought to you by the Duck Hunter. And yes, the cold temperature is still with us, and most Cache Valley schools once again delayed the start of classes this morning after the National Weather Service issued another wind chill warning, forecasting temperatures to be below 0 with wind chills up to 30 below. The announcement last night came after temperatures in parts of Cache Valley never got above 0. The late start impacted all schools in Cache County and Logan City school districts. Meanwhile, the Preston School District canceled their classes today. Also, USU canceled classes and closed offices until 10 a.m. at their Logan, Brigham City, and Tremonton campuses. And classes began at 10:30 a.m. and proceeded as regularly scheduled. So what will it do tonight and early tomorrow? We'll check the forecast here in just a moment. If the cold was not bad enough, hundreds lost power this morning for about 45 minutes after an electrical supply line went down. The outage impacted homes and businesses throughout Logan and was reported right around 9:15 this morning. Officials with Logan City Light and Power reported the city had lost their supply feed from Rocky Mountain Power near Cutler. Electrical crews switched to the Green Canyon substation to restore power. Electricity was restored throughout the city at 10:04 this morning. The outage occurred as temperatures throughout the city hovered around 10 below, and many families were waiting to send kids to school after that 2-hour delay was issued. And a 19-year-old man was killed early Monday after his SUV collided with another SUV in Uintah County. The 19-year-old was heading westbound on US 40 in a Nissan Rogue at around 7:15 a.m. when he slid out of control and slammed into a Jeep Cherokee in the opposite lane of traffic. After being transported to the hospital, the driver later died. The two 17-year-old occupants of the Jeep were also transported with non-life-threatening injuries. Traffic was shut down before reopening while Utah Highway Patrol troopers investigated the accident. KVNU News Time is 4:38.
Are you moving into a new home? You want to breathe your own dirt, not somebody else's. You should have your air ducts cleaned by the Duct Hunter to get rid of old dust, pet hair, and a variety of other people's dirt. Call today to get on the schedule for a free consultation. Call the Duct Hunter at 770-4813.
We are the Duct Hunter. Breathe better, save money, protect your home. We are the Duct Hunter.
KVNU weather for tonight. Unfortunately, we have another wind chill warning in effect from 7 o'clock this evening to 9 o'clock Wednesday morning for dangerously cold wind chills expected. Wind chills could be as low as 30 below 0 tonight. The air temperature expected to be around 15 below. Haze and areas of freezing fog tonight. Partly cloudy, then mostly sunny. And high temperature tomorrow, 5 to 10 above. Right now, we have yet to hit 0. It's been to -1. That's what it is right now, -1 here at KBNU. The cleanest spot in town is Mount Logan Laundry, located at 5th East, 9th North in Logan, also 1st East and 7th South in Brigham City. For more details on these and other stories, visit CacheValleyDaily.com. Let's check Wall Street now from Edward Jones.
This is financial advisor Clayton McMurdy of Edward Jones bringing you the closing financial market report for Tuesday, January 31st. U.S. indexes reversed their pre-market losses and finished higher after the release of the Employment Cost Index, which showed that wage growth is slowing even with near-record low unemployment. With the S&P 500 up about 5.5%, stocks logged their best January since 2019, supported by better inflation data and hopes for a Fed pause. Historically, a positive January bodes well for the full-year market performance. However, the coast is not yet clear in our view because, along with better inflation trends, there are now more signs of an economic growth slowdown. Corporate earnings are now under pressure amid a slowdown in revenue growth and still high labor costs, compressing profitability. Earnings growth estimates for 2023 have fallen to a slightly under 3% from the 9.5% analysts were expecting a year ago. If a mild recession emerges, earnings will likely decline this year. But assuming a possible downturn is not deep or prolonged, corporate profits should hold up better than during past recessions, and the decline in valuations last year provides a potential buffer. Tomorrow, all eyes will be on the Fed's first policy announcement for the year, with Powell's press conference being the key focus. The Fed is expected to downshift to a quarter-point increase from December's 0.5% rate hike, in which could prove to be one of the last hikes in the tightening cycle. In recent weeks, many committee members have endorsed a smaller hike, and as a result, markets now put the odds of a 0.25% increase at near 100%. Today in equities, the Dow was up 370 points at 34,087. The NASDAQ closed up 191 points at 11,585, and the S&P was up 59 points at 4,077. In bond markets, the 10-year Treasury yields are currently at 3.5%. And in commodity markets, the price of crude oil was up $1.15 at $79.05, and the spot price of gold was up $4.30 at $1,943.50. This has been today's Financial Market Report, brought to you by Clayton McMurdy of Edward Jones, member SIPC, serving individual investors with personalized attention and long-term financial advice at 1309 North Main Street in Logan. If you'd like any current stock prices or any additional information, please give us a call at 435-753-0537. Or you can visit any of our 7 branches in Cache Valley or online at edwardjones.com.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. This hour, again, a live radio town hall with Congressman Blake Moore. Appreciate the Congressman taking so much time out of a very busy schedule. If you followed the news, it's just been nonstop legislative priorities, agendas, calendars, and more since the start of the year. And we're headed into even more of this as we discuss the nation's debt, budget, and the future of the economy as well in all of this. If you have a question or a comment for Congressman Moore, call us live, 435-753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868. Congressman, we did get a lot of questions from listeners ahead of today's show via email. I'd asked our listeners to send them in advance if they weren't able to call today. And we got one question that was really interesting and gets into some more broad headlines that you'll see at any time, regardless of who's in the majority in the House or the Senate or who's in the White House even. Listener says, it seems like every week I'm reading a story that China is getting ahead of us on solar panels, on green energy, on whatever it might be. They're getting ahead of us, and their economy sometimes the reports say is better positioned for the future than our own. What can Congress really do about this? And the second part of the question is, should Congress do anything about this? A great question for you from Caroline. And Caroline, thank you.
Absolutely. That is an exceptional question. And there's a very tangible thing that just happened a couple weeks ago with more Democrats voting in favor of it than not, voting to establish a select committee on competition with Chinese Communist Party. This has been a priority for Speaker Kevin McCarthy for as long as I've known him. He's said 3 things: that our nation's biggest challenges are debt, competition with China, and education. So his priority here is to make a very evenly split most committees in Congress have, when you're in the majority, they have a heavier tilt towards the majority side. He's making this like 9-7, 9 Republicans, 7 Democrats, very evenly split, more than any other committees, and putting the best heads together on what we can be doing in areas that we can be focusing on. We have a very, very looming issue with China with respect to Taiwan. And I won't get into many of the details, but like this is not just a talking point. This is very much Xi Jinping, President Xi, has made commitments that he was going to reunify, and basically in order to do that, they would have to invade Taiwan.
Sure.
That happened. It was relatively easy for us to put sanctions on Russia. We have like one brand of vodka that gets imported into Utah, and as we all know, it's probably not a high seller because we don't probably drink a lot of vodka compared to other places. I was on a flight with one of the Marriott family, right? We all know and stay at Courtyards and everything. There's a handful of Courtyards in Russia that they had to sort of reconcile. How do we deal with this? Well, we have to probably shut some of those places down.
Interesting.
But relatively low impact for a global hotel company. We don't have a ton of economic integration with Russia as we do with China. Can you imagine if Marriott had to shut down all of their hotels in China?
Sure.
Imagine if they had the manufacturing that's done for pretty much more than the lion's share of our products.
Sure.
But the good part about that is China is more reliant on us than we are of them. They do have a strong economy, and it is growing, but it is largely reliant on a strong consumer-based economy in the U.S. And so it's not that I have concerns that China can overtake us as a superpower. I don't see a foreseeable issue right now. But when we get into this turmoil of Taiwan, to what extent are we really willing to provide economic sanctions? Will we get it involved militarily? All of that is ill-defined right now on how we play this out. And so this committee that they're putting together is going to be a huge key first step in tackling this. And the other aspect is we have to make sure our manufacturing is shored up so it's not solely reliant on China. So we have to do two things and make sure that we leverage other partners, India, Vietnam. Southeast Asia is a great, amazing place. It does a great biomedical community there, and
Sure.
we need to leverage those relationships. The area that I am concerned, though, is if our dollar becomes weak, and we were laden with so much debt, then the status of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency, that comes into question. And that becomes a bit of that becomes really concerning to me. So that's the area of focus that I think is the thing that we need to make sure we shore up to stay powerful, and we need to deter China from invading Taiwan, and that's going to be something that we'll see how it plays out over the next few years.
Sure. This is a great question here coming in just seconds ago from a listener in the district, but outside of Cache Valley, talking about the infrastructure bill that was passed a while back. Now that money has made its way to states, and Utah has, some odd $1 billion that they can dole out in various ways. Listener asks via the chat, Congressman, do you get to play a role in helping to inform the state's decisions as far as infrastructure monies from the federal government that might be spent within the district? And then in parentheses, listener writes, so that it doesn't all end up in Salt Lake and Utah County? Great question.
Great. Get at the heart of the problem. Absolutely. So infrastructure money, whether it's the infrastructure bill that was passed last year or just in general, we have our say and ability to play a part in that. And so to the regular infrastructure committee work, the regular appropriations, and through that infrastructure bill, we do have an ability to interact with constituents and ensure that First District needs are represented.
Sure.
There are smaller type projects that we just did, and these are things that I actually love the chance to do and to interact with the local community. When I represented the Basin, I don't represent it now, but I have a great relationship, and we helped with a sewer project, and same with Millville that we were able to just do in the northern part, and Manaway got something of our focus.
Yeah.
That's the key to making sure that you have good communication from my staff, from my district staff, from my DC staff, to local mayor's offices, state legislators. We're working on several key things, a pipeline in Weber County, across the board. I'm just spouting off all the different things that we have.
That is great.
Morgantown's got several different requests in, and we get to support different types of grants, write letters of support, make requests, and we do a really good job at spreading that out and making sure that Northern Utah is well represented.
Sure.
There are things like UTA that cut from all the way from Weber all the way to Utah County.
Yeah.
And all of us end up working on some of that type of stuff too. So there's a good strong mix. One thing that I'm really proud of and something I love that we were able to accomplish in the First District was be supportive of that rail project in the Uinta Basin.
Yeah.
Again, while I don't represent the basin per se right now, it's still really productive work that we that I can look at that's tangible, right?
Sure.
I'm looking on my wall here at actual bills we passed. This is a crazy world back here, and a lot of nonsense you have to go through. But when you can get something actually done and signed, sealed, and delivered, it's really important to celebrate those wins. So there's lots of different infrastructure projects, and we are focusing heavily.
Great news, because, again, sometimes that money does pool in those more populous areas here in Utah. So it's good to know that our congressional representation, our state senators, and the House representatives are able to coordinate on this, make sure that we get at least some of it here in northern Utah, because there are some needs. Great question from a listener there. If you have a question, use the chat, of course, KVNU-FTP on Google Chat, or give us a call. A few minutes left here for a call or two, 753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868. We'll be back after this quick 2-minute break with more of our live radio town hall with Congressman Blake Moore.
This is David from Roof Rescue. A roof is not something most people think about until they notice a leak on the ceiling. This time of year, fluctuation in temperatures, along with rain, snow, and ice, can do a number on your roof. If you notice these leaks, they won't go away on their own and are oftentimes a sign that the roof has reached the beginning of the end of its life. Call Roof Rescue for a free analysis, diagnosis, and estimate. Let's fix those leaks and keep you dry this winter. Call 435-999-4268 or visit roofrescueusa.com. Roof Rescue, providing watertight peace of mind.
Creating healthy habits and lifestyles begins when our families are young. This is Dan at the Sports Academy. Keep your kids active with year-round Swim America swim lessons, tennis lessons, and tumbling and trampoline lessons. Both group and private lessons are available to fit your busy schedule. Let our talented coaches teach your kids life skills and build self-confidence that will last a lifetime. Enroll online at sportsacademy.com. The Sports Academy, your club, your results, your life.
Nearly 1 in 2 U.S. adults have high blood pressure. That's why it's important to self-monitor your blood pressure in 4 easy-to-remember steps. It starts with a monitor. Be next to talk to your doctor about your blood pressure numbers. Get down with your blood pressure. Self-monitoring is power. Visit managerbp.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the American Heart Association, and the American Medical Association, in partnership with the Office of Minority Health and Health Resources and Services Administration.
Welcome back to our live radio town hall with Congressman Blake Moore. Great questions from listeners through the chat, through calls, and through many questions sent in via email. I've grouped like questions together here, so if you didn't hear your wording specifically, hopefully we've gotten to your topic at least. Just a few minutes left here with Congressman Moore as we head up to the top of the hour, and he has to get back to work there in Washington, D.C. So if you have a call or a question, please get it in now, 753-5868 or 1-800-369-5868. Barring those calls, Congressman, we did have a question from a listener that I thought was great. and also is maybe a great wrapping up point for you to close out the hour with us here. Listener says, very simple question. Listener asks, what do you feel our blind spot is right now in the United States, economically, I assume they mean, and what are your priorities as far as addressing that?
I would continue on with what we were just talking about in making sure that we diversify our approach to a production-based economy. So in the first district in particular, but Utah in general, but first district in particular, there is a very strong manufacturing kind of corridor. And part of it is associated with the defense and the aerospace division or industry in Utah that hits above our weight. And so a lot of offshoots from that. But we have a strong manufacturing core. That is why Utah oftentimes weathers economic downturn better than other states, because we have such a diverse economy. And so to do two things, I think, would be something very significant for us. One, to make sure that we're not wholly reliant on China for our manufactured goods and products and sourcing of critical minerals and things like that, and onshoring that as much as possible. Because the more we control the supply chain, the better outcomes there are. And sometimes the products end up being more expensive that way, but the disruption can make up for it. It's not going to ever be perfect. We're not going to be soup to nuts. Everything is done in the U.S. As we live in a large global world, we have to identify areas of trade that are beneficial to us that maybe we're not as good at those particular products or efficient, and we have to engage in that. But the more that we can control the supply chain is key. And I'm not going to talk about debt again, because I don't think it's a blind spot. I think it's a glaring spot. But the blind spot is making sure that we shore up that supply chain better, because the potential of the disruption with China could be bad.
Absolutely. And a lot of lessons learned, right, through the pandemic about some of the weaknesses that exist. I loved hearing
Governor Cox oftentimes say Utah has to go through a manufacturing renaissance. Right? Sure. And it's true. We learn that we can be doing more things in our own border on this front. And you do that, you start. So we did an actual bill that's TTM Technologies. I'll call it out specifically. It's in Logan.
Sure.
That it encourages, gives the tax incentive to make sure that we pull a lot of that printed circuit board manufacturing back in the U.S. And then once we develop that core, make sure that it's more so for national security and not allowing for Chinese manufacturing of these very critical components that could be tampered with espionage and things like that.
Absolutely.
But once you establish that core again, then you can build out the commercial applications of it, and it will layer on itself, and that's ultimately beneficial to our private market as well. It's just that defense.
And as Congressman Moore said, something that's happening right here in Logan, Utah, right here in Cache Valley. Congressman Moore, always a pleasure to have you. Appreciate taking so much time for us today. And for listeners, please find out more about all of these topics via the official site for Congressman Moore, blakemore.house.gov. We'll do this again soon, I'm sure, and appreciate your time today for our listeners as well. Congressman Moore, thank you. For those just tuning in, this hour and the entirety of our Town Hall with Congressman Blake Moore is available on our Podcastics service. Podcast. Just search Podcastics and KVNU's For the People. Hit subscribe. Never miss an episode, including this one. Thanks again to all of our listeners for their questions, to Congressman Moore for his time, and I hope you'll stick around. Hour 2 of today's show, take a look at what happened on Capitol Hill, day 2 of week 3 of the legislative session, and what Cache Valley lawmakers had to say about a slew of water bills coming down the pike. That's coming up in hour 2 of today's show right after this here on KVNU Logan.